So today is a big day. We are actually gonna get the Blazer body back on the frame, finally. It has been almost 8 months of just doing rework on the Blazer because I did everything wrong the first time. And we're almost back to the same spot where we started about a year ago. So we got a lot of work to do in today's episode. Let's get started. Also, don't mind the ratchet strap on the frame. I don't want to talk about it right now. The Blazer is about to get really heavy, and I don't know if I'll be able to push it by myself anymore. So enjoy this view because this will be the last time that you see the Blazer on the rotisserie for a minute now. So things are about to get good and we're about to make a ton of progress on this Blazer. So I got right to work taking the Blazer off of the rotisserie. I had to jack up both of the hydraulic jacks on both sides of the rotisserie to get the Blazer a little bit higher in the air, and then I used the custom jack stands that I made, and then I just put those bars across it, unbolted the Blazer from the rotisserie, and then I was able to unbolt the rotisserie from the middle and slide out both ends. Once the rotisserie was out, it was time to slide the frame underneath or roll the frame underneath the body of the Blazer. Now, I was running into some issues with the front of the Blazer just because it was a little bit too low. I put my jack stands a little bit too low and the frame was actually going to run into the bottom of the Blazer body. So what I decided to do was actually take off the front wheels, lower the bottom of the Blazer, and then slide it underneath because my front jack stand was all the way extended. So the next step was actually installing all of my brand new body mounts. You're going to want to do brand new body mounts whenever you do a frame off, just because the old body mounts are usually worn out and they're cheap and it's just easy to replace now. Once I got the body mounts in, it took me a minute to get all of the bolts lined up with the holes on the frame because there's about 8 holes that you have to get lined up, so the Blazer body has to go down perfectly. Now this is when having a lift would make my life so much easier just because I could move the frame underneath the body and then lower the body down hydraulically. Once I got all of those lined up, then I could go underneath and tighten up all the bolts of the body. Okay, so we got the Blazer body on the frame. I had to jump in the back and grind off my old body bolts that I had welded on. We have a brand new set of body bolts that is gonna go in, and then that will finish pretty much bolting the body to the chassis. We also decided to replace this passenger front leaf spring just because we think the old one may have been a little twisted. So we decided just to replace that. That way we don't have any issues down the road. And now we're pretty much to the point where it's time to do all of our final metal work. So I have Firewall patches that we're going to start on pretty quick, and then in order to do the rest of these patches we have to do rocker first and then quarter. But before we do the rocker, we actually have to get the door lined up. That way we know that the rocker is straight with the car. We also have to cut out all of this bracing so it will let our body relax, and then once the door's on, the rocker's on, we'll be able to do the final metal work on the quarter, and then that will finish up all of the major metal work on the Blazer pretty much. So getting these doors in the right place is absolutely crucial right now, just because we are going to base all of our other exterior metal parts off of where our doors are, so they have to be in the correct spot. Alrighty, so we made a little bit of progress. You can see passenger door is on and it's pretty much lined up to where it should be. This one was pretty difficult just because you can see the only spot that we have to line it up is actually the body line right there, and then a little bit on the quarter. The rest of the quarter's gone, the rocker's gone. So really there's nothing else we can really line it up except this right here. But the top of the doors are already wrong because this one bows out, and then if you look at this other side actually bows in, and so we're gonna have to pull that and fix it. But you can see it's super tight right here, but then the gap is really good back here and it lines up really nice with that body line. So really there's only a couple of areas that we could kind of gauge off of where the door is supposed to be. And this tight gap right here isn't a big deal. We can actually just trim this and then re-weld it and make that gap good. But before we do anything like that, I want to get the rocker on to make sure everything fits up down here. Once the rocker is on and the bedside is mocked up, then we can put our fender on just to make sure all of that looks
good. And then once all that's mocked up, we'll be able to start welding the patches on. So the reason why I'm doing it like this is just because sometimes you get things wrong, and I really don't want to have to cut and redo things on this Blazer. So I'm going to get everything mocked up, make sure everything fits good. For example, like I could do the rocker to just the door right now, and then once we get the fender on, we could say, oh, the rocker needs to go down, or it needs to go up, or it needs to go back or forward. So I'm going to get everything mocked up on this just to make sure everything fits before we start doing any welding. So like I said, we're going to get the rockers and the quarters mocked up and all of this good first. Before we actually throw our fenders on to get the front end mocked up, Mike is actually going to start cutting out our firewalls. We have some bead-rolled patches that we're going to be putting in. So while Mike is doing the firewall, I'm going to jump to the rockers and start getting all of those mocked up. So it will go rockers first and then quarters. But this is exciting. I mean, both the doors are on, and we haven't seen the Blazer like this for a long time. And it's going to be really cool to see this all as one complete body pretty soon. So let's get started.
So while I was trying to get the driver's side rocker mocked up into place, Mike actually got here and he started fabricating a piece that goes on the inside of the rocker. It's what the top of the rocker mounts to, and then that piece welds to the body of the Blazer. Mine was completely rotted out, and they actually do not sell these, so we had to build them. So he used the brake to bend the first bend, and then the second bend we actually had to bolt to the table and then beat it down just because the brake couldn't do it. We actually need to purchase a special tool called a press, and that will actually be able to do these tighter bends that we need to do. So once Mike finished fabricating those pieces for me, he actually jumped on the firewall, started getting that passenger patch cut out, and I got that piece that he fabricated for me welded in on the driver's side and the driver rocker mocked up again.
Okay, so this rocker is mocked up, and you can see it fits terribly. A lot of the times you have to modify these to make them work if you're going to do them pretty nice. For stock OEM guys, this will be fine, and it's just an easy patch replacement. But for us, we're gonna do a little bit nicer. We're gonna make the gap nice and tight and even on the bottom and then along all of these sides. So while I was getting the rocker pretty much mocked up into place, Mike was actually building this piece that is going to act pretty much as a flange, and it just sits right in here, and that is what the rocker will weld to once we get it mocked up for the final time. So now what I have to do is I'm going to mark where this rocker sits right here, and then I'm going to pull it back off. We're going to get these mocked up. I'm going to have to shrink the edges just so that it gives it that curve so it'll line up with the rocker, and then we'll throw the rocker back on, make sure everything fits, and then we will spot weld in the rocker, and that will pretty much be it. We're gonna wait to do all of the gaps. Pretty much last, we need to get the front end and everything assembled first. But while I am doing that, Mike is gonna be jumping on the firewall, getting the firewall cut out because we have these patches that we're going to be installing. Okay, so we got a lot of work to do and got a lot of cutting to do. So we're gonna get started on that firewall and also get to modifying that rocker.
This is it. This will be the last time that the Blazer firewall looks like this. This is going to be one of the first custom things that we do to the Blazer, and I have been so excited to use these panels. I have seriously had them in the garage for probably almost a year now, and I have been looking forward to the day that we finally install them. So this is when it's really nice to have two people, because while Mike was actually getting this firewall patch ready to go in, I was doing all of the welding on the driver's side rocker. So I was getting that done and he was getting the firewall trimmed up. Now you can see that he had to cut it out in a couple separate pieces. That's because the firewall actually welds to that rear support that goes inside the cowl. Now you have to be careful because you need to remember to run a bead of seam sealer along the inside of the firewall if you ever do a firewall patch, because the water will drain inside there. And if you do not run a bead of seam sealer, it will drain inside the cab and it will soak your carpet and wet your floor. So we're going to make sure to do that before we do paint. I actually had Mike jump over to the passenger side just because I want to rust seal the whole entire inside of the cowl before we do any more work. So I decided that he should jump over there and get that finished up, and then we would rust seal everything at once, and then I guess next week he would weld in the firewall patches. And I say next week because my new toolbox that I actually ordered from Harbor Freight a month or so ago finally got delivered. So I've been using my dad's 2 toolboxes that I filled with all of my tools, and they are so full you can't even open the drawers anymore. So I decided to order this toolbox, and I am so happy with the purchase. I was actually able to put all of my tools in the box and have tons of extra room, and it's way organized, so we're going to be able to work way more efficiently and effectively on these projects. So the next step was actually rust sealing the inside of the cowl. I actually did this on Wednesday because Saturday we're going to weld them in, so I want it to be dry.
Okay, so I pretty much got these firewall patches ready to go in. I had to go and prep everything underneath, and then I rust sealed everything. That way it's all coated. When we epoxy this, I'm gonna be able to epoxy this part right here, but all the way down in here, it's gonna be really hard to get epoxy. So that is why I coated it right there. And then I also coated the back sides of both of my firewall patches. And now I pretty much have to wait until this dries, and then I can prep all my edges, throw some weld through primer on, and then we will be able to get those up into place and start welding them. So it's currently Wednesday right now doing this. I'm hoping this Saturday we'll be able to get all of the rest of this done. Alrighty guys, welcome back. It is Saturday, so all of the rust seal has dried and we are ready to throw these patches on the firewall. So Mike's coming right now and he's actually gonna start on that. I am actually going to finish getting the driver rocker all the way mocked up, and then I'm gonna weld it in hopefully before he gets here. So goal for today will probably be finish both of the firewall patches and get both of the rockers mocked up. And get ready because we're about to make some huge progress on this Blazer. Finishing up the firewall is gonna be huge, and also getting the rockers on is gonna be absolutely huge. That is a big step in getting this thing one step closer to epoxy.
So we had lots and lots of welding to do today. I actually got here early and started welding on that driver rocker. I was plugging all of the holes that I drilled so that I could weld it to the body, and then also welding the seams on the front door post and then also on the rear. While I was doing that, Mike actually got here and he kept trimming up the firewall and prepping it. While I was doing that, Mike got here and kept going on the firewall, getting it perfectly trimmed up because we're not going to be overlapping any metal here. We're going to be butt welding the entire firewall. So you have to make sure it's trimmed and perfect and has a good gap around it so we can weld it up. It's crazy because I feel like on most projects, the prep is usually about 90% of the work, and then the final work, like the finishing work that's going to make it completely different and really make everyone's eyes pop, is about 10%. So Mike seriously spent a couple hours at least getting these firewall patches perfectly trimmed up and ready to fit into the holes that he cut. So at this point in the build, I finally got the driver rocker all the way finished up. I actually jumped to the driver bedside just because I really couldn't do much else right now. So I started to trim that up and get it fit into place, and then I had to drill all of the spot holes as well. So I'm just completely prepping this so that when the welder's ready and when Mike's done with the firewall patches, we can throw these bedsides on really quick and just knock them out. A lot of beginners that are just getting into cars make this big mistake, and I actually made this big mistake on the Blazer, is I cut out way too much sheet metal. The only parts of the Blazer that was rotted back here was just the top of the wheel wells, and I actually cut out the entire bedside, which really doesn't need to happen if it's not rusted. Because just remember, everything aftermarket will not fit like OEM, so you're just going to cause yourself more issues if you cut out more stuff. So you want to cut out as little as possible, that way your patches you can modify and make them work. This bedside really doesn't fit very well, and so we're gonna have to do a couple modifications to it just to make it fit.
Okay, so I got the rocker all the way welded in. Mike is getting the passenger firewall patch pretty much tacked into place, and then he's already got the other one fit up as well. I started to get the bedside pretty much all fit up, but I have to wait for the welder, and we only have one welder right now, so I'm gonna jump onto the other side. I'm going to get this piece in first like we did on the other side, which just sits up there. So I'm gonna get it trimmed down so it'll fit up in here, and then just get it screwed into place, and then as soon as Mike's done with the welder, I'll be able to weld that in. And then I'm also gonna grab the other rocker, and I'm gonna try and get the other rocker mocked up as much as I can.
Now, I'm not kidding when I say this is probably the most progress that we have made on the Blazer in one episode. I think March is when we actually started to take apart the Blazer. That was the first episode that we did on the Blazer, so it's almost been a year, and we are just itching to get this thing in epoxy before the year mark. We've had to do so much metal work this past year, and I'm really surprised we haven't got burnt out of it, luckily. But we're almost there, and so we're really just pushing over that final couple hurdles that we have to do all of this finishing metal work, and then it will be in epoxy.
Okay guys, well we made a ton of progress today. So Mike got the entire firewall pretty much finished up. Check this out. So both of the patches are pretty much finished up. This one, he actually welded all the spot welds on the back side, and it did warp the panel just a little bit right here, you can see, but a little bit of mud will fix that. I'm not too worried about it. This one, he got the entire outside all the way welded, and then he still has to go in and do the spot welds on the back side. And I am so happy with how this looks. Bead rolled firewalls look really, really nice when they're all the way body worked and painted, and I'm really glad that I decided to do this. Now, we are gonna do a weld across this seam right here because I actually wanna delete that. I want the whole entire firewall to be smooth, pretty much except this panel right here. And we'll do what we can to make this panel look a little bit better, but this is kind of the sleek look that I am going for in the engine bay, and I'm really happy with it. I think it looks great. So while Mike was actually doing that, I was doing the driver rocker. So I actually got the entire rocker pretty much all the way done. So it's completely welded on. All I have to do now is grind the welds. And then I also started to mock up the quarter, but I needed the welder, so I couldn't do much there. But jumping to the other side, I actually got a lot done over here. If you look in the passenger side, I found a lot of rot right here. So there's actually 3 different layers right here. So what happens when these panels that are pretty much sitting on top of each other start to rust is they start to bulge out. And this whole piece was bulging right here. It had a little bit of rust. And so as I got deeper and deeper, I pretty much had to cut this far to get rid of all the rust. So now I've actually got my pieces made already. So this piece is actually gonna be my first piece, and it goes right here, just like that. And then I'm gonna weld those holes. And then my second piece is right there. And then I actually did another piece right here. And then I also did this piece right here, which I'm gonna have to trim to fit right here, which is gonna be the weather strip channel. So really, I had to get all of this mocked up and built first, and then I'm gonna have to final weld all of this, and then I'll be able to start on the rocker. So I pretty much mocked up the rocker. I got this piece bent and all of my spot holes drilled, and the rocker actually fits up really nice on this side. It fit up a lot worse on the other side, and we had to massage it a lot more, but this side, it fits really good. But I just had to do all of these patches first before I do my rocker patch. But I'm actually gonna start on that next Saturday. So Mike's gonna come back, we're gonna finish the firewall, I'm gonna finish up the driver rocker, and then hopefully we're gonna start on this bedside, get this bedside done, and then if we get that done, we'll jump to the other bedside. But really, one more good day of work on this, and we're gonna see a lot of progress. Okay, well, it's not quite a week yet, it's actually Wednesday. It is Thanksgiving week this week, so I am off of work, so I'm gonna be able to put a little bit more time into the Blazer. So I'm gonna try and get most of this rocker finished up before Mike gets here on Saturday, and I may finish up the Firewall too, so we can just jump to the next thing on the list. So squeezing over here, you can see I already got this piece in off camera. So this is the brace that really the outer rocker is going to weld to. So I still have to grind my welds, and then I found a lot of rust right here. So this patch I already put in, I just have to grind the welds. I have my second patch ready to go, which is gonna go just like this, and then that will get welded in, and then I also have that little tiny baby patch that is going to go right here. And then to finish it all off, I have to do this patch right here, and then I also have to finish welding this patch. But I want to get the rocker mocked up first before I do this patch right here, just to trim it and make sure everything fits really nicely. So I'm going to start by doing these little patches, get them grounded because those have to go in first before the rocker. And then after that, I will get the rocker mocked up into place, all of my holes drilled and prepped and pretty much ready to go on. And then we will have to modify this and figure out where the rocker is going to sit so we can weld it onto that.
So like I said, the first thing that I started on was actually doing those patches on the floor. So I got those patches done first just because the rocker actually sits over the top of them, and so they have to be done first. So I got all the pieces cut and everything fitting really nice, cleaned it all, threw weld through primer on everything because you want to make sure everything is coated or else it is all going to re-rust. So you want to make sure you give it as much protection as you can. And then I got everything welded on. Once all those patches were in, it was time to mock up the rocker one more time just to make sure everything fit with all the new patches that we put. And then it was time to prep everything, get all my holes drilled, get everything ready, weld through primed, and ready to go on for the last time.
Okay, well the rocker is all the way prepped and mocked up. I swear the prep always takes so much time. It took me a couple of hours just to get everything fit up perfectly and get it all prepped. So now I am going to start welding all of my spot holes. So I also had to build this piece right here. You can see it came out pretty nice, and I'm gonna have to final weld all of this now. I do have to build one more little patch that's gonna go right here, but I'm gonna do that after I weld all of this. But we are almost done, so let's get welding.
So now that I made sure everything fit and the door gap was good with the bottom of the rocker, it was time to pretty much plug all of the holes that I had drilled. So I would use all of these clamps. I actually went to Harbor Freight and bought more clamps just because I didn't have enough. And I use these clamps to pretty much keep the metal really, really tight. That way when I weld it, it's gonna be extremely tight and you're not gonna have big gaps or loose pieces. You wanna make sure everything is mounting flush. And then I pretty much just worked my way down. So swap the clamps around and then just try to keep the metal as tight as I could, exactly right where I was welding.
Okay, so the passenger rocker is all the way finished up. You can see I got these patches all the way grounded here, and then all of these patches up here finished. So a little bit of body work is gonna hide all of this. And then also got that front seam of the rocker welded. So the last thing that we actually have to do is we got to weld these spot holes on the Firewall patch that we did, and then also jump on the front and grind down all the welds to finish up the front end. We're also going to weld this seam right here. That way we don't have any issues with it cracking because we're going to have a smooth Firewall.
So we are in the home stretch. Mike just had to weld that last seam that was on the Firewall. And the reason that I did this is because we could seam seal this and then we would have to bodywork over the top of it just because I want it all the way smooth. I don't want to be able to see that seam. That is kind of the look that I'm going for in the engine bay. And so I decided to weld it, and then we're just going to grind it, and it's going to look really nice. While I was grinding the Firewall, Mike actually jumped on the inside, and you can see him doing the spot welds on the inside of the Firewall, welding the firewall support to the actual firewall. So I just followed him and ground the rest of the Firewall, and that pretty much finishes up these Firewall patches. But Mike did a great job on these patches. They came out so good. We did have a little bit of warpage problems with them, but that is common on super flat areas where you're welding. So we're gonna be able to fix all that in bodywork, but I am so stoked. This looks absolutely amazing. I'm so happy that we did this, and I cannot wait to see this painted.
Okay, so the firewall patches are done, and then both of the rockers are finished up. So that'll pretty much be it for this episode. In the next one, we're gonna be hopefully getting the bedsides on, getting our whole entire front end assembled. That way we can start to do all of our gaps and fine tune them, and then also making some custom modifications to the rear of our tailgate. So thanks so much for watching. See you guys next time. Peace out.